say their hellos to all these family and friends here. You see that trio of kids there in the center next to the woman in the pink shirt with the Isa shirts on. I believe that is the family of the pilot, Andreas Mogensen. As we mentioned in our profile of Andy, noted that 6 months away from your family is a long time, and especially when you have kids that are as young as his are, all of them younger than 10 years old. And so, a lot changes in 6 months, and I'm sure they'll miss their dad, but NASA and its partner agencies do a lot of work to help make sure that the astronauts are able to keep in touch with their families while they're on orbit, as we are seconds away from them coming out in 2, 1, and there we are. The 4 members of the crew-7 mission. NASA astronaut and Commander Jasmine McBelly. We have pilot Andreas Mogensen. On the right-hand side, JAXA astronaut and mission specialist Satoshi Furukawa. And on the left-hand side, Konstantin Borisov, representing Roscosmos, the 3rd cosmonaut to fly to the International Space Station as part of the commercial crew program.
I'm getting pumped up just listening to you. The picture you just painted.
Let's take a moment to just hear some of the conversation, these final moments of goodbye.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, again, it's hard to not feel the excitement.
T-minus 3 hours, 18 minutes and counting. In about 3 minutes, they'll go ahead and hop inside those Teslas and get ready to make their trip over to the launch pad. And as you might think, the inclination, if you were those 4 crew members, might be to wish, give your family a big old hug last time you're going to have the opportunity before you head up to space. But this crew has been in quarantine. You see Jasmine McBelly giving air hugs and kisses to her young children and her husband as she gets ready to head off to the space station. But they've been in quarantine for the last 2 weeks, and obviously they don't want to risk contamination as they get ready to head up to space. They want to preserve that environment for
And here they come. Crew-7.
their fellow team members who are on orbit now. Those in the Russian segment, as well as the members of the Crew-6 mission, who will be departing station no earlier than September 2nd. Of course, that is weather dependent, so we'll keep an eye on that. As Teslas 1 and 2 with the crew members get ready to head out. Looks like the gull-wing door is having maybe just a little bit of trouble just getting closed, but that should be fixed in just a moment here. There we go. And if you want to get a chance to listen a little bit to some of the music that they're going to be playing on the way to the pad, and you see the man in the tie-dye, that is Jasmine McBelly's husband, holding their 2 young girls. in SpaceX hoodies, dressed just like their mom. Fitting moment of farewell. Jessica Watkins getting a couple last-minute photos for the family there as they get ready to head off in the next 30 seconds or so.
For so long, we're thinking, let's get busy in there, that we have some music. And it's so nice to hear a couple of the favorite songs from each of your
You hear a little, it sounded like them saying bye-bye to Mom. She's getting ready to go on quite the adventure. She's also bringing 2 plush dragons that she got for each of her twin girls. They'll fly to space with her and
sure, it gives them
come
something to
back down
identify
just a
with.
little
You
bit
know, they're
in
wearing
6
the
months.
Same outfit as Mom today, and
So it'll be
cheer her along.
quite the present when
So in the first Tesla, we
Mom,
got
the
to close
astronaut,
out
comes
the
back
2
and
suit technicians. In the
delivers
second,
dragons that have flown in
commander and
space.
pilot. In the third, mission specialist 1 and 2. And bye, they go. Bye, bye.
I think you need a longer bye.
You nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
There they go. And so as the crew departs, the Neil Armstrong operation.
And there they go, T-minus 3 hours, 14 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. The Teslas with the
Kennedy Space Center to launch pad 39A.
historic launch complex 39A. We'll be seeing them pass by the vehicle assembly building, the massive iconic building here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, coming up in the next few minutes.
Is because it's a human thing to explore. Humans have always wanted to push the boundaries. We're curious beings. We want to know what is out there. My name.
T-minus 3 hours, 11 minutes, and 34 seconds and counting. You see the convoy turning onto State Road 3.
Crew-7 has departed the
as seen from an aerial view now, the helicopter
way to the pad. It would
keeping
take about
track.
20 minutes for them to journey out to Launch Complex 39A across NASA Kennedy Space Center. I just heard from our TLP rocket chaser Ali, who was out there for crew walkout, and just hearing about her experience getting to see the crew sending
This
them off
is
to
a
the
band
pad
from the roof
as
of
they
the
get ready
UAV,
for
not from
today's
the
launch.
helicopter shuttle.
You
You
can
see
see a
that
live view from inside the
bit.
convoy heading out to the pad. We'll keep this live shot on the screen as long as we can, but we're glad to have you joining us here. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name's Zach. I'm the founder and host here at the launch pad. And here at TLP Network, it's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow, because we believe that space is better together. And we're glad to have you joining us here tonight. If you guys have questions, you can send those questions in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad, and we'll answer those there. If you want to become a TLP member, we greatly appreciate your support. Helps us expand our equipment, dream of new ways to bring you the best possible coverage of everything in space. We are now 3 hours, 11 minutes and counting until launch. Crew Dragon's hatch has been confirmed open as the pad crew is now ready to receive Crew-7 out at the launch pad, where they will begin their ingress International Space Station crew is also preparing for the crew. Now, they won't actually arrive at the station for about 23 hours, and we will be bringing you a live tracker for that as well. There is a view from the helicopter of the convoy making its way across NASA Kennedy Space Center. So we'll be continuing to monitor that. We were extremely lucky to get to sit down with the crew of Crew-7. I spoke with three of them not too long ago.
Learned about NASA for the first time, and particularly the Apollo missions to the moon. I thought that was
T-minus 3 hours, 7 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. You can see that convoy making their way much closer now to the vehicle assembly building, the VAB. About to pass in front of it in the next, 30, 45 seconds or so. From the vantage point of the road that is on the left-hand side, on the right of the road, is the press site. From our vantage point here, we're seeing the crew pass on by. As you see, a lot of folks getting one last glimpse there near the press site entrance. And you see those two Teslas with the 4 members of the crew-7 mission passing by the VAB right now, as well as the Launch Control Center. May have caught a quick glimpse there as the crew is rolling down the road of Launch Complex 39B, where you saw a lit up structure. That is the mobile launcher that supported the Space Launch System rocket used on the Artemis 1 mission. It is now back there at the launch pad for tests as it continues to work through its campaign toward the Artemis 2 mission. It'll be the first crew mission as part of the Artemis program, sending 4 astronauts, including 1 Canadian, on a trip around the moon and back, testing out a number of functions of the Orion spacecraft. a beautiful shot of the moon right here as we were just talking about the Artemis 2 mission. And here it is again in perspective of the Falcon 9 rocket that is getting ready to launch in just over 3 hours from now. As the crew continues to wind its way toward the pad, it should be arriving at T-minus 2 hours and 55 minutes. It'll be about 20 minutes between the point at which the crew arrives at the pad and when they enter in Crew Dragon Endurance. The particular Crew Dragon spacecraft is preparing to make its third trip to the International Space Station, having previously supported the Crew 3 and Crew 5 missions.
Core on countdown. Advanced team is complete and ready for crew arrival. We are on schedule.
T-minus 3 hours, 2 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Hear the call out that things are still on schedule. As SpaceX is preparing to receive the crews, they are making their way toward the pad. Getting close, passing one of the SpaceX hangars there in the center of your screen. Building where the rocket rolls out to the pad at 39A. This pad has been quite active since SpaceX took over it. You can see the wide shot of the crew approaching the pad there. Getting ready to arrive in just a matter of moments. This will be the 68th orbital launch for SpaceX from Launch Complex 39A when this Falcon 9 lifts off. Later on this morning, as I'm just looking up at the clock here on the East Coast, it is now 12:26 a.m. Florida, happy Saturday to everyone. Getting a great vantage point, the crew access tower there, as the Teslas are getting ready to park in a matter of moments, and the crew will get out and get ready to do their traditional lean back, looking up at the Falcon 9. Really have a moment to take in the moment, the gravity, if you will, of preparing to go to space. 2 of them for the very first time.
Core on countdown. Crew have arrived at the pad on schedule.
call out for arrival continues their on-time departure for the ISS at 3:27 a.m. this morning, Eastern Time. Taking the view from the press side here at T-minus 2 hours, 57 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. See the blinking lights on the right-hand side of your screen of the helicopter making laps. As we're just a couple minutes away from the crew exiting their Teslas, getting ready to make that lean back moment, taking their ride to space. You see the moon continues to set on the over the horizon. On the right-hand side of your screen, that is the white dot that you see there. Appreciate the nearly 900 of you that are joining us now in our live coverage as we are now under 3 hours. For those of you who maybe have just joined in the last several minutes, you're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. At this point, the crew has just arrived at the launch pad at Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. They have suited up in the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout building, made the drive over to the launch pad. They just parked. They're about to exit their vehicles and take a look at their impressive ride to space, the Falcon 9 rocket. Standing tall, having flown 67 prior missions SpaceX has from this pad. That includes both Falcon Heavy and Falcon 9 missions. At the top of that rocket, you see the SpaceX crewed vehicle. That is the Crew Dragon spacecraft. This one has the name Endurance. Endurance is making its third trip to the International Space Station, having previously supported the Crew-3 mission, as well as Crew-5. SpaceX and NASA have rated those spacecraft up to 5 mission. As you see, Jasmine McBelly, the commander, and pilot, ESA astronaut Andres Mogensen, getting ready to, there's that lean back, taking a look at their Falcon 9 rocket. A high five as they get ready to head up to the elevators. So part of the reason why they do the lean back instead of just tilting their head back, it's because those fly suits are a little rigid around the neck. Think back to the 1989 Tim Burton Batman and the immobility of the bat suit. It's sort of a similar problem there, where he wasn't able to turn his head swiftly, and so he really had to make full body motions. Sort of a similar thing here. In a moment, we should see the two mission specialists of the crew-7 mission, that being Satoshi Furukawa as well as Konstantin Borisov, also have their own lean back moment. Jasmine and Andy ascending the stairs, getting up to the next platform. Doing fist bumps to the SpaceX support crew, the ninjas as they like to be called, as they get ready to make their final phone call before heading up to the crew access arm in the White Room. And they are able to make a call to whoever they'd like to make a final call to before they go ahead and ingress or enter into their ride to space, that being the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. First on the telephone, Commander Jasmine Montebelli, followed by the pilot ESA astronaut Andreas Mogensen. T-minus 2 hours, 51 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. Jasmine has concluded her phone call as Andy is next on the line. The next notable milestone in the countdown is crew ingress. That's coming up at T-minus 2 hours, 35 minutes. Andy giving a little wave to whoever he's calling. Probably his family. I'm sure they are watching the live feed here, so got away from Dad on the live feeds before he gets ready to continue on the trip up with his commander on this mission. He'll be a commander in his own right, though. When crew-7 is on board space station, there will be a change of command ceremony, and Andreas Mogensen will become station commander. You're seeing the two mission specialists now of the crew-7 mission. Satoshi Furukawa and Konstantin Borisov taking a look up at their ride to space as well. Konstantin making his first trip to space. Satoshi going for a second time. Thumbs up. Heading off to the elevator now.
Core on countdown. Crew have arrived at the White Room and are preparing for ingress. We are on schedule. T-minus 2 hours, 48 minutes and counting. You're taking a look at split screen from NASA on the left-hand side. You see the two mission specialists getting ready to make their phone calls as Commander Jasmine Mukbeli and pilot Andreas Mogensen are now entering the Crew-Dragon spacecraft. The first two to enter in, getting ready to head to space in less than 3 hours now. This view is inside the crew access arm. Here's a split screen on the left-hand side that's inside the crew access arm. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that at the top of the crew access tower. It's the white horizontal pathway that extends over to the Crew-Dragon itself. You see, looks like Satoshi's still making his phone call, getting ready to wrap that up in just a moment here. For Satoshi, he's getting ready to make a very different and distinct flight up to the International Space Station. Last time he was aboard a bit more compact Soyuz spacecraft. This time a little more roomy SpaceX Crew-Dragon. Konstantin Vladisov now having one of the SpaceX ninjas dial his person of choice, likely his family as well. As he gets ready to make his first trip to space, making that one final call. On the right-hand side of your screen, you see there the Commander Jasmine Mukbeli on the right, pilot Andreas Mogensen on the left. Getting set in and ready for their flight to space as well. Shortly after liftoff, we should see what is known as the zero-G indicator, some type of plush item
That'll be a visual cue of them having reached microgravity. In one of the pre-flight press conferences, I had asked Andy about some of the things that they're bringing aboard the station, as well as the rest of the crew, and they talked about some of the mementos that they were going to bring with them up to the space station, family photos and the like. Andy was about to tell us what the zero-G indicator is because he and his family were able to pick what it is for this mission. However, they don't want to spoil the surprise, and so they opted not to say. But just know that when we do see it start to float, that was inspired by the pilot of the crew-7 mission, Andreas Wilkinson. So, looking forward to that. Got a number of differing zero-G indicators, each that means something to the crew that are flying them. For instance, on the crew-3 mission, that was the first time that one of the astronaut class of 2017 that were candidates in 2017 became full astronauts in 2020, graduated from astronaut training that year. The class known as the Turtles, of which Jasmine McBelly is a part. On the crew-3 mission, their zero-G indicator was a turtle. Surprise, surprise. And having just come from making their calls, Konstantin Borisov bringing it around town as they make their way down the crew access arms. He is a character. We talked to him before the mission here now as they enter the White Room. Now they are making their signatures next to the NASA meatball, another one of the traditions that is part of spaceflight. You saw there the name tags that were taken from the crew. Gonna bring those up with them. Just a nice moment of inclusivity for those that are helping support them on their ride to space. Taking a little piece with them. You notice that they're signing next to the NASA meatball version of the logo, the round symbol on the left-hand side. That is where astronauts that are flying as part of the crew rotation missions will sign. But you see the SpaceX logo to the right of that right now behind Satoshi Furukawa. That is where you'll see the signatures of astronauts that have flown on private missions, such as the 2 missions to the space station managed by Axiom Space, as well as the No Destination mission Inspiration 4 that launched back in September 2021. You see all those signatures next to the SpaceX X logo.
Core on countdown. Seat 1 and Seat 4 are beginning their ingress into Dragon. We are on schedule.
T-minus 2 hours, 40 minutes, 25 seconds. The crew ingress continues on schedule as you saw Satoshi Furukawa enter into the Crew Dragon there. Konstantin Borisov now taking his seat on the left-hand side. The 2 members of this crew that are flying to space for a second time pilot Andreas Mogensen and mission specialist Satoshi Furukawa. They've both been to the International Space Station before, both making that trip up on a Soyuz spacecraft. So getting to enjoy a little bit more of a luxurious, spaced out environment on a trip up to space. With the Crew Dragon here. You see there on the top left-hand side of your screen, just above Constantine's head, just to the right of that, you see the NASA version of the mission patches for the Crew 3 and Crew 5 missions. That's because those were the two missions that this Dragon happened to fly. T-minus 2 hours, 37 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. Want to go ahead and thank the nearly 1,000 of you who are joining us for our live coverage this evening, as we are approaching about 11 minutes before 1 a.m. this morning here on the East Coast. If you're just joining us, things are moving smoothly with the countdown to the launch of the crew-7 mission with, as you see on your screen, 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut. If you're just hopping in with us for our live coverage, I'm Will Robinson Smith, joined this evening by Stephen Young, Adam Bernstein, and Michael Kane to bring you this live coverage here from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. On your screen are the 4 members of the crew-7 mission, going from left to right on your screen. That is mission specialist and Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. To his right, from our perspective, Konstantin's left, that is pilot of this mission, European Space Agency astronaut Andreas Mogensen. To the right on your screen, that is Jasmine Mokbeli, the commander of the Crew-7 mission, a NASA astronaut, making her first trip to space. And to her left, our right, face is blocked by our countdown clock, but that's all right. You'll see more of him throughout the evening. That is JAXA astronaut making his second trip to space. That is Satoshi Furukawa. Thank you, Stephen. And the 2 black suited figures that you see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, those are SpaceX's support crew, the closeout team, also known as the SpaceX Ninjas. we approach T-minus 2 hours, 35 minutes and counting. Again, we want to thank the nearly 1,000 of you who are in the stream with us watching live. If you haven't already, you'd like to help support our coverage, we'd appreciate if you hit the like button, share the stream. That helps more people be able to find our coverage as we continue bringing these live pictures to you throughout the next 2.5 hours to lift off, and in the aftermath of that, as we have now crested over 1,000, thanks to the new folks that have just joined us. And if you'd like to become a channel member, you get access to our member-only videos as well as a 4K live stream of this launch, as well as the others that we bring to you from Florida's Space Coast. We're seeing increasingly more and more missions launching from Florida every year between NASA, United Launch Alliance, and some of the other newer companies coming online. In fact, this will be the 43rd orbital launch from the Cape in calendar year 2023 once the Crew-7 mission launches. T0 targeting liftoff at 3:27 a.m. this morning. That's Eastern Time. 0727 UTC for those watching around the world. T-minus 2 hours, 33 minutes. Right at the dot. Saw Crew-7 Commander Jasmine McBelly and the others giving a wave to the pair of SpaceX support crew that have helped strap them into their seats here on the Crew Dragon Endurance, as they have now left the capsule and will soon begin the process of closing the side hatch. That hatch closure, though, not for a little bit now. That's coming up at T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes. In between those points, now that the crew is seated and strapped in, they'll go through some of the procedures like checking their communications, as well as you'll see the seats rotate to their launch position.
Copy, Dragon. Stand by for umbilical launch.
T-minus 2 hours, 31 minutes and counting. You heard Commander Jasmine McBelly.
CDR, PLT, MS1, MS2, com check.
Give the call out to begin those comm checks.
Core, loud and clear.
How's you loud and clear? How many?
Core's got you loud and clear.
Andy going ahead and giving us comm check.
Loud and clear. How many?
Core's got you loud and clear.
So I've got you loud and clear. How many?
Core's got you loud and clear. Umbilical comm checks are complete. Report when ready for seat rotation.
And you heard Constantine and Satoshi go through their comm checks as well, so good communications between the Dragon and SpaceX, supporting this mission from where they refurbish their Falcon 9 first stage booster, Hangar X over on Roberts Road here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. In the next couple of minutes, you'll see the seats rotate to their launch position, as you heard Jasmine McBelly saying that they are ready to rock and roll on that. And you'll see that coming up on your screen in just a moment.
Copy, Dragon. We will report when initiating. Initiating seat rotation.
And hear the call for the start of seat rotation. You'll see motion happening on your screen in just a moment here.
Dragon SpaceX, seats are in the launch position. You are go for Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
You hear the call out that they are getting ready to do their suit leak checks now that they have rotated their seats into the launch position. T-minus 2 hours, 27 minutes, 23 seconds and counting.
Crew Dragon, you are go for Section 3 suit leak check.
At T-minus 2 hours, 24 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. It's just a couple minutes after 1 o'clock here on the East Coast. As we are getting closer to hatch closure on the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. See there at the top of your screen. Taking a look at our live chat here, want to go ahead and thank a couple of folks who are helping to contribute to our coverage of the space program and this launch in particular. Giving a shout out to Alan Gable for a very generous $20 super chat donation. Thank you, Alan, for supporting us at that level. And we also have some new channel members. Danielle S. Swidler Sigrist. Apologies, Danielle, if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you for joining the channel at the pad leader level. We'll also have Alex Evans joining us at the pad leader level, and one of our moderators gifting a Spaceflight Now membership to Trouble with the Trees. So thank you, Astro Joe, for not only helping to keep things kosher along with Stephanie B on the chat there, but really appreciate you sharing the love and helping to expand our community here and bring in more people who enjoy both human and uncrewed space flight. Lots happening here on the Space Coast and around the world. We appreciate you helping us bring that story to more and more people. So thank you to all of our new channel members and to Alan as well. Again, if you'd like to become a member of the Spaceflight Now YouTube channel, that gives you access to the member-only videos. Not only that, you're also able to get a discount from our merch shop, and we do have the crew-7 patches available for purchase. That's shop.spaceflightnow.com. And Danielle, glad you're enjoying watching the coverage. And we're glad you stumbled upon it too. And thank you to Josh King for the $20 super chat. Really appreciate you supporting our coverage at that level, Josh. And we hear the call out for
Dragon, we copy and concur for good suit leak checks. Closeout team will be performing its final closeout steps. You are go to proceed to Section 4 and report when ready to close the side hatch.
and you hear the call out for the good leak checks as they make sure everything is prepared for their flight suits as they get ready to depart from Pad 39A in 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 53 seconds from now. We see some folks asking about trajectory. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get further into the broadcast. Rest assured, that is a question that we get asked very often with all of these missions. Everyone wants to know where they're going, and if you happen to be in Florida, does that mean will you be able to see the launch? So we'll look forward to answering that question in more detail and giving you a nice visual on that, as you get a nice visual both inside and outside the Crew Dragon Endurance here. On the left-hand side of the screen, of course, that is inside the capsule. On the outside, you see the SpaceX closeout crew there, donned in their black jumpsuits, lovingly referred to as the ninjas for SpaceX.
Dragon crew is ready for side hatch closure.
Copy, Dragon. Crew is ready for side hatch closure. At this time, we are also going to proceed into our pre-launch comm checks.
You see them going through and making a really fine examination of the side hatch there before they get ready to seal it. Hatch closure should be complete at T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check. Core has you loud and clear. Tidris comm check is complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Now that the crew seats
Dragon DC on countdown 1, comm check.
have rotated, they're going through another round of comm checks.
DC loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Just to make sure that everyone can
Dragon,
hear
MD on countdown 1, comm check.
everyone else.
MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, comm check. MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check. LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1, comm check. LD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. And Dragon, LD on Dragon to ground, comm check. LD, loud and clear. Let's go fly.
And Dragon, SpaceX, launch configuration comm checks are complete.
T-minus 2 hours, 17 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. You hear the completion of those comm checks now that they are in their seat configuration for launch. Coming up in about 15 or 20 minutes or so will be the completion of the hatch closure procedure. You see that door started to come down a little bit as they walk through those steps, making sure that that side hatch is completely devoid of any type of debris. When I say any type of debris, I mean literally even a hair can be detected there, and they want to make sure it's entirely free of any type of debris like that. T-minus 2 hours, 14 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Taking a peek back at our live chat, want to thank Daniel Chiquita. Apologies, Daniel, if I butchered the pronunciation of your last name, but thank you for your $5 super chat and saying hello from Brazil. Hello to you. Thanks so much for joining us this evening for our live coverage of the Crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. Things have been proceeding nominally, smoothly throughout this evening's broadcast, and the countdown has gone according to the planned timeline. So we continue to remain on track for a liftoff of this crew on their 6-month journey on orbit, launching at 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time.
Closeout team is taking its final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Ensure that all items are secure from now through launch.
T-minus 2 hours, 2 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. You see the hatch, the side hatch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft is now closed. And they are going through the process of doing their hatch leak checks. Make sure they've got a good tight seal on that door. Just about an hour or so, they'll do another weather check as they are getting ready to get closer to the process of fueling the Falcon 9 rocket supporting this mission. That go, no-go pull for propellant load will be taken at T-minus 45 minutes, so we're still a good bit away from that. But things continue to proceed nominally on this mission as we're getting closer to the launch of this 4-member crew of the International Space Station. It's a calm night here on Florida Space Coast. That call out for another crew briefing.
Okay, John, this one's short. At this time, the Dragon team and F9 team are not tracking any issues, and you could ask for better weather. How copy?
And hear that brief discussion that they're expecting good weather. The 45th Weather Squadron, who tracks weather forecasts for launch operations here on Florida's Space Coast, the Eastern Range here. They forecasted 95% favorable weather for launch. For tonight's opportunity, you see the lights from Pad 39A glistening on the water across the way. Liftoff, the crew-7 mission. thank you so much for sticking with us for Spacefly Now. I'm Will Robinson Smith. As we continue our coverage of the Crew-7 mission, we are joined right now by a member of the Commercial Crew Program. Sam Testa is with the NASA team that helps with recovery operations. She is the lead on that. Sam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So this is the 7th crew rotation mission, the 8th time that SpaceX is supporting NASA and launching astronauts to the International Space Station. Routine is not the right word because every operation is, an important process to distinguish each and of themselves. But does it feel like it's starting to become a more normal thing to be out here about every 6 months, getting ready to launch more humans to space?
Yeah, we're definitely getting into our rotations. So we have one around the February time frame. We have one right around this time of year. So routine is a word we try to stay very far away from. We try to keep a healthy paranoia or an active paying attention to everything that's going on. We never want to feel routine because it is such a complex process, but we are getting used to that rotation of the spring and the fall launches right now.
Yeah, I think Bill Gerstenmaier in the run-up to this said, from his perspective, he likes to say, stay hungry. SpaceX says, stay paranoid, as you mentioned, just that rigorous sense of making sure everything gets checked and double-checked. Coming into tonight, how are you and the team feeling about, the launch and the operations there to follow?
We're feeling really good. We're on schedule right now. Everything's going according to plan, and somebody knock on wood, but it seems to be going really well, and it's a gorgeous night for a launch, so we have our fingers crossed, and we have high hopes for a really great launch tonight.
And as we can see on programming, Stephen, if you can bring up the picture just outside of the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule where the hatch closure just happened about 7 or 8 or so minutes ago. Your role is really, when we see this capsule come back down to Earth after the end of 6 months, talk about what that looks like when you and your team really step into action for that.
Yeah, so the majority of our role is upon return, like you mentioned, when we're bringing the crews home after spending 6 months in space, back to their families in Houston. So right now we're gearing up for Crew 6 return. They've been on station for about 6 months, and we have a team getting ready to deploy to Kennedy Space Center to start some last-minute training to make sure everybody has what they need to be on the recovery vessel and be out there when the capsule re-enters the atmosphere, when the parachutes come out, when we see the Dragon splash down into the ocean, and we open that hatch for the first time and give that crew their first breath of fresh air that they haven't had in a couple months now.
And, for those of us that aren't lucky enough to be on that ship when the crew gets brought aboard, what are those first moment likes? I mean, we see it on the screen. There's not always audio, but when they come out and they get, carried off for their medical checks, what's it like welcoming them back down to Earth?
Oh, they are so happy to be back. I mean, it's been a really long day for them. They've been getting ready on station to come home, packing everything up, getting into their suits. They've been in the capsule for a certain amount of hours at that point, depending on what their phasing was. So when they actually splash down and we get them onto the recovery vessel and out of the capsule, they are just loving that fresh sea air that they haven't had in a really long time. They're excited to see a lot of their friends. Our teammates have been with them since before they launched, so it's really great to see them again when they come back because it's been a really long time, and they know they're going back to their families soon, so they are all smiles.
And once they get on the recovery vessel, about how long does it take to get them from that ship back onto dry land?
You'd be surprised. It's actually just over an hour for the most part. We do medical checkouts with them on the vessel to make sure everything's healthy and that they're feeling good. And so at the culmination of that, it's usually about an hour.
And like I mentioned, this is the 7th or the 8th time that crews come back in coordination with NASA. What are some of the things that you and your team have learned as far as maybe improving procedures or things that have kind of changed as you've gotten the opportunity to go through them in real time again and again?
Yeah, there have been tons of improvements. I mean, every mission we're improving over and over again. I feel like we learn something new every time, which is the beauty of spaceflight. Going back to the fact that it's never routine, we learn something every time we do this. We've definitely learned how to be more efficient on our training. We do a lot of training starting with Hewitt, which is helicopter underwater egress training. That's kind of our first operational training. And then we do vessel safety training with SpaceX, and we do medical operations training to make sure that everyone's ready for the day of. So I would say that training is a big part of what we've learned and become more efficient with, as well as how we deploy and how we get to where we're going. Because we have several landing sites across the state of Florida. We can land on the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic Coast, and so moving around can be a little tricky as we try to kind of compete with the weather, especially in Florida with the microclimates that we have. So that's another one where we've gotten better and better every mission.
That was
was going to be my next question. For all those different recovery sites, what's the process like? I mean, obviously, weather being among the most important factors, but when it comes down to really locking in, okay, is it going to splash down off the coast of Panama? Are we going to be able to see it from here on the Space Coast? What are the things that go into that in addition to the weather?
Oh man, there are layers and layers of things that go into that. I couldn't even begin to list them all. But weather.
If you could start with one.
I would say weather. Yeah, weather is definitely the biggest one. I mean, we are watching that days up to minutes and hours leading up to the actual deorbit burn right before they come through the atmosphere and splash down. We have multiple sites across the state, so trying to find that perfect sweet spot of weather where we've got the wind where we want it and the wave states where we want it. We've got no precipitation, no lightning, because Florida never has any of those things. It's definitely our biggest challenge and the thing we are absolutely watching the most.
Of course, when you see as much activity in the tropics, that is something that comes to top of mind. Speaking of the return of Crew-7, this is going to be the fourth time that this particular Dragon has now flown to space, going to be splashing back down. So we've talked over the course of preparing for this mission about some of the things that are being learned and adapted to prepare these capsules to fly beyond the 5 sort of certified flights now. From your team's perspective, Crew Dragon capsule, as it looks to enter its 5th and eventually 6th flight.
Yeah, this is definitely one of our more veteran capsules, which we love to see. It's been on a couple flights now, like you mentioned. One of the things we like to see, and we always want to see it, right, is our drogues and our main parachutes. That's definitely one of the things that we always keep our eye close on when we're coming back down, because the dynamics associated with parachutes are so complicated. We look for all good drogues, all good mains, and then that really great splash into the water.
And so, between now and I think September 2nd, when is the earliest opportunity to return Crew-7, what will you be doing between now and then? I'm sure there's a lot of preparation that we don't see that happens behind the scenes.
Yep, part of the team is here at Kennedy supporting Crew-7 launch. The rest of the team is getting ready to deploy to Kennedy. Over the next couple days, we have some meetings planned, of course, to get ready to have everyone in the Kennedy area to get that training done, that just-in-time training that we have leading up to mission, and then we'll start having our meetings for weather briefings. We do that a couple days prior to mission, several hours across those days. It's a lot of meetings, but we'll also start mobilizing. We'll get all of our safety gear, all the vests and the life vests and the air bottles for our helicopter flights, all of our eye protection, ear protection, everything that we wear in terms of safety gear when we take those helicopters from the airport out to the recovery vessel. And then it's just getting the team where we need to be in time to be there.
Lastly, Sam, obviously everyone has their own unique journey into being a part of the space exploration enterprise. How did you happen to fall into commercial crew and what made you decide to want to work for NASA and especially in this particular role?
Oh, good question. So my grandfather was an inventor and an engineer, and he had just an immense passion for space. He would take me out after family dinners and point out all of the constellations, and his love of space absolutely transferred to me. And so ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to work at NASA. I started as an intern actually in 2014 in design engineering, and I ended up doing that for 7 years. I was a lead design engineer for a while. And then I decided I wanted to try out operations because I had been in design for so long. It's one of those things that design and operations work hand in hand, and so I wanted to see the other side of the coin, and I landed here as a NASA recovery director and commercial crew.
Sam, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. I know it's going to be a busy, morning now as we get closer to launch. We are T-minus 1 hour, 44 minutes and some change, so good luck to you and the rest of the teams, and we look forward to seeing Crew-7 come home.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. And of course, we'll be with you throughout the rest of the evening, so be sure to stick with us for our live coverage for the next hour and 3/4 to lift off, and of course, through the process of launch, and we'll have much more coverage for you throughout the rest of the morning.
small businesses, telephone communication is still a kind of groping in the dark.
Hello? Hello? Who's this?
But now you can overcome all that with the Merlin system from AT&T. It's incredibly easy to use. So if your business isn't running as smoothly as you'd like, say hello to the Merlin system and put an end to it. AT&T, the right choice. So if your business isn't running as smoothly as you'd like, say hello to the Merlin system. Now you can overcome all that with the Merlin system from AT&T. It's incredibly easy to use.
AT&D, and MVAC fuel bleed has started.
As we are approaching the final hour before the launch of the Crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. The hatch is closed, and the launch teams are getting ready to begin the process of fueling the Falcon 9 rocket. So before that gets underway, let's take a look at the back half of the launch timeline, getting ready ahead of that T0 liftoff. Now coming up at T-minus 45 minutes, that will be when the launch director takes the go, no-go poll for the start of propellant load. If the poll is a go, then at T-minus 42 minutes, the crew access arm will retract. You see that there on the right-hand side of your screen where the live picture of the Falcon 9 is, the arm where we saw all 4 crew members cross from the tower into their Crew Dragon capsule. That will swing away, not fully to the point where it was stationed away from it before they got into the launch procedures, but back a little way just in case it needs to return to the capsule. At T-minus 38 minutes, the Dragon launch escape system will be armed. And that will allow the Dragon to be able to quickly move away from the Falcon 9 rocket in the event of an emergency. Continuing on with the count at T-minus 35 minutes. That's when liquid oxygen or LOX, as well as RP1, rocket-grade kerosene, will start to flow into the rocket. T-minus 16 minutes, 30 seconds. Liquid oxygen will start flowing into the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Before that happens, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back of the launch pad as the feed lines continue to be chilled. At T-minus 10 minutes, a little bit of a different note as compared to non-crewed missions with the Falcon 9 rocket. That's when they will conduct their final pre-launch communications check. At that point, we'll get a quick comm check from each of the 4 crew members, and usually the commander will have some final parting words before they get ready to launch on their adventure into space. T-minus 7 minutes, the Falcon 9 will begin a chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. That involves filling a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. Chill down procedure is important since it protects the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to launch, first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4 minutes 30 seconds, the strong back retract will begin. You see on the live pictures here on the right-hand side of your screen, that is the vertical structure parallel to the Falcon 9 rocket, also called the transporter erector. That'll tilt back to a degree of about 1.5 degrees, just a little bit of a lean back, not quite as much as we saw the astronauts do when they took a look at it from the ground. It'll stay in that tilted back position until liftoff. At that point, strong back will tilt back in a much more rapid fashion and clear the way for the Falcon 9 to climb off the pad. About 2 minutes left in the count. Liquid oxygen should be done loading onto the Falcon 9. At that point, the rocket will be fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers for those final pre-launch checks. The propellant tank pressurization will begin. About 45 seconds to lift off, the launch director will verify the go for launch. The engine ignition is going well. All 9 engines are healthy and they ignite. The crew will lift off when the hold down clamps release for a launch at T0, currently targeting 3:27 a.m. Eastern, 0727 UTC, coming up in just about 1 hour and 2 minutes. Coming up now, less than 1 hour to the launch of the crew-7 mission. If you're just joining us here on our live stream, thanks so much for spending part of your Saturday morning here, local time on the East Coast, with us. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. You're watching our live coverage of the NASA SpaceX crew-7 mission to the International Space Station, where 3 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut in
59 minutes, 43 seconds and counting, will lift off, supported by their Falcon 9 rocket, inside the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule, and head up to the International Space Station for a 6-month long-duration mission. This is the 7th crew rotation mission for NASA in the Commercial Crew Program, and the 8th time that NASA has flown, or that SpaceX has flown, astronauts up to the ISS. The first time began this operation back in May of 2020. That was...
And Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 5. When ready, report go for launch.
It was the Demo 2 mission with NASA astronauts, now former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, first to ride on a Crew Dragon spacecraft up to the orbiting outpost and return safely to Earth. Tonight's mission will mark the 11th time that SpaceX has flown astronauts into space, all of them launching from right here. This is Launch Complex 39A, which has seen dozens of missions over its lifetime of the space program. Everything from Saturn V rockets, space shuttles. Now this pad is leased to SpaceX for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions. And in the future, a little hard to see it because it's not lit right now, but to the right of the Falcon 9 rocket, you see there's a red light at the top of it. That is the tower that will support Starship launches.
Systems including avionics, navigation and control, software, propulsion, life support, and communication with ground support teams. Apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X. With less than an hour until launch, they are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and for launch.
And of course, NASA has its own team members at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, who have been preparing the International Space Station for Dragon's arrival. They recently gave their go for launch and confirmed the station is ready to receive Dragon and the new crew. Now, upon liftoff, today's flight to the space station will take almost 30 hours, with Dragon flying autonomously the entire way. And just like autopilot on a commercial aircraft, the crew always has the ability to take manual control of the spacecraft if needed.
It continues to be a smooth countdown, and we're looking good for an on-time liftoff. Coming up at T-minus 45 minutes, the team will report their readiness for propellant load with a final go-no-go poll. In the meantime, NASA's Courtney Beasley is going to help us take a closer look at
Thanks, Jesse. I'm here in the International Space Station Flight
captures. But for now, we'll send it back to Jesse and Leah.
SpaceX's ultimate mission is to make life multiplanetary. To get us there, we've been developing a fully and rapidly reusable transportation system called Starship, the most powerful launch vehicle system ever developed and designed to carry passengers and cargo to Earth orbit, the moon, planetary destinations like Mars. In fact, earlier today, the team completed a successful static fire of our Super Heavy Booster 9, an exciting step towards our next Starship flight test. But you have to learn to walk before you can run, or should I say fly, and our learning started with Dragon, designed from the beginning to transport both people and cargo to space. The Dragon hanging from the ceiling behind us was initially flown to certify SpaceX for cargo missions to the space station.
Dragon launched to space in December 2010 and became the first private spacecraft to return from orbit. 2 years later, Dragon became the first commercial spacecraft to deliver cargo to and from the space station, and in 2020, as we remember well, became the first private crewed spacecraft to reach the International Space Station.
Altogether, the reusable Dragon spacecraft has completed 9 human spaceflight missions and visited the International Space Station 3 times. Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond. And these days, we are very much focused on the beyond.
Now, of course, we already have explorers on the Red Planet, paving the way for humans who will arrive in the future. NASA's Perseverance rover landed on Mars in 2021 after an almost 7-month journey. Its mission addresses high-priority science goals and also provides opportunities to gather knowledge and demonstrate technologies that challenges of future human expeditions to Mars. These include testing method for producing oxygen from the Martian atmosphere, identifying other resources such as subsurface water, improving landing techniques, and characterizing weather, dust, and other potential environmental conditions that could affect future astronauts living and working on Mars. Now, of course, Perseverance also brought along another passenger named Ingenuity. This is the first helicopter ever flown on Mars. There's Ingenuity being deployed from Perseverance and those historic flights that we've seen so far.
When the time comes for human explorers, they'll have to take everything with them for a surface mission. Building bases or even cities on Mars will require huge amounts of cargo and eventually crew. So we're designing Starship from the beginning to carry hundreds of tons of cargo into space and be able to be refueled in orbit. Before Mars, Starship will play a key role in the exploration of the moon. SpaceX is providing the lunar lander, which will return astronauts to the lunar surface for the first time in 50 years under NASA's Artemis missions. With the ability to deliver cargo and people to the lunar surface, we'll be ready to help humanity build a sustainable presence on the moon and learn how to live off-world before the next step to Mars.
Today, however, we are going a little closer to home, and the work we're doing on the space station also paves the way to Mars, but it takes place in low Earth orbit. As Courtney mentioned, the area includes any spacecraft that orbits at or less than 1,200 miles from our home planet. That's pretty close in comparison to our moon, which is almost 240,000 miles away, and is referred to as deep space.
Deep space missions like future missions to Mars will challenge us like no spaceflight journey has before when we start looking to send humans millions of miles away from home. Long-duration missions on the space station, just like crew-7, directly inform how we'll plan to support the first humans bound for the Red Planet on missions that could last months or even years.
So we really look forward to Artemis launches to the moon. For now, I'll send it back to Daryl and Jessica at KSC.
Thank you very much, Leah and Jesse. And to keep our astronauts safe while on missions to the moon and Mars, NASA is working to understand the long-term effects of living in space. Earlier, NASA's Jasmine Hopkins caught up with NASA's Chief Deputy Science Officer for our Human Research Program.
One of the investigations launching on crew-7 is nicknamed Cypher, and it will study the physiological and psychological changes in up to 30 astronauts. Joining us now to talk more about it is Kristen Fobb from Johnson Space Center. So Kristen, tell me about your title and the 14 different investigations that make up Cypher.
Yes, I am the Deputy Chief Scientist at the Human Research Program, and 14 research studies, all wrapped into one research complement called Cypher. What we want to do is study the impact of microgravity on bone, exercise, vision, behavioral health, not only and for Mars.
Right, Kristen. And on that note, we have been studying in low Earth orbit for over 20 years now. So how is Cypher adding into that?
Yes, 20 years. We've learned a lot about the changes that happens in the human body in space. Plus, we also have learned a lot about the twin study that happened a few years back. So Cypher is just a build on top of all of that knowledge that we've gained so far, plus all of the technology that we have today, data analysis. It's a great time to start Cypher.
It really is. And after the launch of crew-7, how soon can we expect to get the data back from Cypher?
Well, once we start getting data, we'll start processing it, and then when we start to understand some of these observations and findings over hopefully these 30 crew, it's going to take time. It's 30 crew. It's going to be a lot of information. But once we start to find some interesting observations,
Absolutely. It will be well worth the wait. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Kristen.
It's my pleasure.
Back to you.
All right, thank you, Jasmine and Kristen. We're going to turn it over now to Hawthorne, California, and check in with our team at SpaceX headquarters for an update on the launch progression. How are we doing?
Thanks, Daryl. I'm Ronnie Foreman, a commercial sales manager here at SpaceX. We are coming up on just about 46 minutes until launch, and our teams are carefully moving through the process to lift off. A lot of preparations have brought us to this point today. For those of you following along, you'll also know that we stood down from yesterday's launch attempt for additional data reviews. But for now, all systems are looking good for launch. So next up, our launch director will check in with the team for readiness, both for prop load and for launch. The 7 SpaceX responsible engineers, often called REs, indicate that they are go by voting electronically. The launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, or MD, on the nets, and NASA launch manager to make sure that they're ready to move forward as well. And as Jesse mentioned earlier, the Falcon and Dragon launch teams, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch and Landing Control Center at Hangar X in Florida. On screen, you have that incredible view of the Dragon spacecraft with the crew access arm still in the service position. The crew right now is on board Dragon, waiting to get the green light to stow the crew arm for launch and arm the launch escape system. Great shot of our astronauts there. Once the launch director gives the go-ahead, we should get a good view of the access arm as it swings away from the capsule. The range continues to be go for launch, monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor. And at Kennedy Space Center, weather is looking good for launch. If you're joining us on the ground in Florida, you know it's just about 82 degrees outside with light ground winds. Overall, we are looking good for launch in just about 45 minutes with a 5% chance of weather violation. Right now, we are listening in for that readiness poll announcement and instructions to our launch team. Again, this poll is going to be the go or no go to move forward with propellant loading for today.
Going up this time, but they're going to be on station for 6 months. Talk a little bit about some of the science that they will have later with cargo resupply missions. We know that there's obviously another CRS-29 mission that will come up while they're there, another Northrop Grumman mission which will actually be launched by SpaceX over at Pad 40, as well as I think maybe Dream Chaser. This group might encounter Dream Chaser, or that might be that maybe.
As soon as that briefing ends, we should see that crew access arm, which you can see lit up on your screen right now, immediately start to move away from the capsule when that stow procedure begins. Coming up on just launch. Great nighttime views of our Falcon 9 and crew-7 capsule there on the screen.
Go ahead, Dragon.
In wrapping, I have to ask, just because you said are we going to see another round of water bears go up? Are there any tardigrade missions on the horizon?
And sorry, Dragon, I just missed the last of your sentence there. Can you please repeat?
From Dragon,
polling is complete. The joint NASA and SpaceX teams have pulled go for LES arm, propellant load, and launch. For all operators in MCCX and Hangar X, both control rooms go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until the launch escape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain in their console, maintain the stroke cockpit until MD confirmed successful disarming the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent, no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into launch abort. In T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated board criteria for the remainder account. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fires imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. Launch control at this time, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Copy, proceeding to arm crew arm for movement.
And with that, we are moving forward toward launch. Propellant loading will begin in just over 5 minutes, but in the meantime, let's check back in with Daryl and Jessica.
All right, thank you very much, Ronnie.
Crew access arm retraction started.
We now have crew access arm retraction. So if you look at your screen, you can see there the crew access arm moving away from the Dragon. Another great shot of it there, articulating away. It takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to move away, and this is a critical milestone, Jessica, as that arm moves away, because now that means if the astronauts needed to get off that rocket for whatever reason, they could either bring the arm back quickly, and it can move, as I understand it, a lot faster than it's moving now in the case of an emergency egress, or they would move forward and arm the launch escape system. That hasn't been armed yet. So this is the moving and stowing of the crew access arm so that we can clear that away from the rocket and get ready to lift off. After that,
Crew access arm retraction complete.
we're now waiting to hear that Dragon is go for section 7, closing the visors and
Dragon
launch escape
SpaceX,
system.
you are go for section 6, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Well, they changed the number. It's the same.
Dragon Happy is go for section 6.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for section 6,
Same milestone.
close visors and arm launch escape system.
I hear from previous crews that this system arms the very loud thump, so they can actually hear that on board.
Which makes sense. You've got those engines, those Super Dracos, which are
Dragon visor closed, arming launch escape system.
right there next to their heads, right? You know, because
Copy, your go.
Right, it sounds like that was Jasmine saying she was ready to arm, and that command can be sent from either the ground or the crew, and the crew is sending that command now to arm that system. And that launch escape system is, of course, the system that will propel us away from the rocket, the crew capsule itself with the crew inside, in the event of any type of emergency with the rocket. And that is, of course, a system that we hope to never use, but it consists of 8 Super Draco thrusters on this Dragon vehicle that are used only for this abort. And we say we hope to never use it, we hope to not be in the situation, but we have had situations where we've had incredible in-flight tests. Unintentional, for example, there was the launch abort for the Soyuz for Nick Hague's first launch in 2018. Pretty exciting event, dynamic time, but something that showed us how robust these systems are. It performed nominally and carried Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin back to safety.
Verified armed.
got the verification of the launch escape system now armed. Mentioned Nick Hague As I understand it, he counts himself having gone to space twice.
That's right, or at least 1.5. But this system is now active. They do that 2 minutes before loading of the prop, since that, of course, then does present a more risky situation with that prop on board, and it will stay armed all the way through orbital insertion. I've also been told by previous Dragon crews that you can hear the system of valves opening and actually even the flow of the fuel itself as it comes on board.
The scenarios in which the launch escape system will be used.
F9 tanks venting for prop load in 10 seconds. Expect loud venting.
There they are warning them about that, exactly what you just mentioned. Giving them a heads up that they'll be hearing those sounds.
Yeah, Victor Glover was telling me it's a very noticeable process. You can hear the opening and closing of the valves, and there are these low hums and kind of a fluttering sound as that super cold liquid oxygen and kerosene fill those large propellant tanks, first on the first stage and then on the second stage. Must be pretty exciting to be hearing those noises, knowing what that means and how much closer you're getting to liftoff.
This is pretty unique in the launch industry, where the astronauts are inside the Dragon, inside their spacecraft, as it's being loaded with propellants.
That's correct.
That launch escape system you're talking about, if it were needed, it can get the crew several miles offshore out in just 7.5 seconds. That's equivalent to a peak velocity of 436 miles per hour. So it really moves. It can also get it off the top of a moving rocket as well. So it's got to have that kind of power.
Right, at all those different phases all the way until they're in orbit. And that's one of the things that we protect for here as well when we look at the weather forecast. It's not just for the actual launch itself, but to protect for any of those contingency landing scenarios in the various areas where they would splash down in that event.
Propellant load has started.
So now the propellants are flowing into the Falcon 9 rocket. RP-1, refined kerosene, and liquid oxygen, the oxidizer. That part we can see externally because as the liquid oxygen levels rise inside the Falcon 9, it's of course super chilled liquid oxygen, highly densified, and it will super chill the skin as well of the rocket and will condense the air around it. And there's been well over 200 Falcon 9 launches, so if you've seen one before, you're familiar with the sight. The rocket condensing that air, that warm, humid Florida air, which we have been enjoying this evening, at least with a light breeze.
That's right. I think it's cooler than Houston anyway, so I'm enjoying my time here.
Good, good. All right, for another update, let's send it out to Hawthorne, California, an update from SpaceX.
Thanks, Daryl and Jessica. Now, before we send them to space, let's get to know our crew-7 astronauts a little better. We'll start off with none other than the commander herself, NASA astronaut Jasmine Mombelli, making her debut spaceflight.
My name is Jasmine Mombelli. I'm the commander of NASA's SpaceX crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. Baldwin, New York is where I grew up. I always loved team sports from a really young age because you rely on one another, and that's something that I think is really important to know going forward in your career. I joined the Marine Corps. Sure, I wanted to fly jets. I thought you had to be a jet pilot to become an astronaut. I she went to watch STS-116 launch while I was waiting to start flight school, and Sunny Williams happened to be on that flight. I realized she was a Navy helicopter pilot, and from that point on, I went full steam ahead. All four of us are so proud to represent what is possible when we come together. Ultimately, everything we do is to benefit the Earth.
Right next to Jasmine in Dragon Endurance is Andreas Mogensen, today's pilot representing the European Space Agency and making his second trip to low Earth orbit.
My name is Andreas Mogensen, and I'm the pilot of NASA's SpaceX crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Copenhagen, Denmark. In 2008, ESA were looking to select a new class of astronauts, and I applied. There was about 8,500 Europeans, so I thought there's just no way that I'll get selected. The chances of being selected are too small, but that changed when we were down to about 20 candidates. My first mission to the International Space Station was on a short 10-day mission. I had to hit the ground running as soon as I arrived on board, and as soon as I landed back on the Earth, I knew that I wanted to go to the space station. I'm especially proud of the fact that our crew-7 mission has 4 different astronauts from 4 different countries and 4 different agencies.
Next up, mission specialist Satoshi Furukawa. This JAXA astronaut is no stranger to the space station after spending 165 days in orbit as part of expeditions 28 and 29 in 2011.
My name is Satoshi Furukawa. I am a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Yokohama, Kanagawa, which is right south of Tokyo. The first human landing on the moon when I was 5 years old. I thought it was a great moment for humankind. I had a longing for space from my childhood. The moment I was the happiest moment in my life. Crew-7, we are conducting many scientific researches on the space station to benefit future space explorers. I am very proud of being a part of this excellent team of international partners and also researchers, engineers, flight controllers, flight directors, and so on. Because working as a team and working together, we can accomplish the big mission.
Rounding out our fully international crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. He was selected to the Cosmonaut Corps in 2018 and today marks his first flight to the orbiting laboratory.
My name is Konstantin Borisov, and I'm a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-7 mission to the International Space Station. For those who ask what spaceflight is, I would say that we have 3 big jobs on the space station. First job is experiments, second job is take care of the station, doing the maintenance, repairs, storing things, restoring things, cleaning up. And the third big topic is actually taking care of your body, because in weightlessness you cannot help but train. I think many people don't understand that technology advancement which we have had during the last 50 years has mainly come from space exploration. People get very comfortable with using their phone and having very fast computers, and space motivates us to create those advancements. I want to take part in it, and I want to put a small stone into this pavement which leads us to the new asteroids, to the new planets, and to the new systems.
Now, as we see with all of our crews, these 4 crew members who make up Crew-7 have a mission patch they worked together to design.
The first thing that you notice is the white dragon on top of the Earth, its neck craned into the number 7 for Crew-7. Its tail curves upwards towards a golden star, and they say that symbolizes our ascent towards the stars and the pioneering spirit needed to propel us further into space. The blue, white, and red on the tail are the common colors and the flags of all 4 nations flying on this mission.
Now we are less than 30 minutes to launch, so let's check back in with Daryl and Jessica at KSC, where the countdown continues.
All right, thank you very much. Everything going well with the countdown so far. A little over a mile and a half from the launch pad we're going from today, this morning, 39A is 39B, where the mobile launcher is back out on the pad right now, going through testing for the Artemis 2 crew mission to the moon late next year. Here's more about Artemis in our Moon Minute.
This particular first stage booster is making its trip to space. This is tail number 1084.
For the first time, Artemis 2 astronaut on the moon. Astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen visited Orion at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
And it looks amazing. Their handiwork is gorgeous. I'm ready to take it for a spin.
Until launch day arrives, the crew is training at the Johnson Space Center in Texas. They use the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, a giant pool, to practice safely getting out of a floating mock-up of Orion. And it's not an easy task. Navy divers in rafts will harness and hoist the astronauts into the air by helicopter, where they will be taken to a nearby Navy vessel. Back at Kennedy, we got a look at the brand new Artemis crew transportation vehicles.
So the first 9 miles of the journey to the moon starts in these crew transport vehicles.
On launch day, these fully electric, zero-emission vehicles by Canoo Technologies will reunite the Artemis 2 astronauts with Orion at Launch Complex 39B. NASA's powerful moon rocket, the Space Launch System, and Orion will carry them on the rest of the 250,000-mile journey to the moon. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute. And for Artemis updates, there's a QR code on the bottom left of your screen, right there. Actually, bottom right. You can visit, you can use your cell phone to scan it, or you can visit the website at nasa.gov/Artemis2. Earlier this evening, our own NASA's Jasmine Hopkins caught up with NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, who's here watching the launch from SpaceX's firing room.
Administrator Nelson, today marks a first for NASA, the first time in a single launch that each astronaut represents a difference of this diverse crew.
Well, it's a sign of our times. We are an international program. For example, we're going back to the moon in order to go to Mars. It's going to be an international mission that will launch with an international crew. So too, tonight's launch is entirely an international crew, save for the commander, Jasmine, an American astronaut. And so here we go. Now, isn't it interesting that what space does in our NASA program, it unifies us, it brings people together, and this is so true with what we're seeing tonight.
Right, and Administrator, you recently visited South America, and later on this year you're planning to visit India as well. Why is it so important for NASA to foster these international partnerships?
They are delighted, indeed, eager to learn more about NASA and to partner with NASA. And so that's what we find when we go to another country. It's usually the president that wants to see us. And for example, in this South American trip, we talked to the president of Brazil and Colombia about what NASA can provide in the way of information from our satellites to help them protect the Amazon rainforest from being destroyed, which is a high agenda item for those countries. Indeed, it's a high agenda item for the entire world. I'm going to India. India is one that we want to have a close relationship with. We've already been doing things such as science experiments with India. We've got a major science program going that will be Earth observing with India next January. But now we're going to train and fly an Indian astronaut. So it is happening as we speak, and the United States has been the beneficiary of it.
Absolutely. Administrator Nelson, thank you so much. Back to you.
As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be very top of the vehicle is the Dragon spacecraft. In total, there are 16 Draco thrusters Dragon can use in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
And just wanted to note, one thing that we did miss just a moment ago was a call to the crew. There was a sensor issue that they are tracking. However, they are just continuing with the count, continuing to monitor it. And so we are continuing to discuss what we have in front of us, which is Dragon. Together, the Dragon spacecraft and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus 1 under the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight. The trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, and on some cargo resupply missions, we use Dragon's trunk to deliver the new solar arrays that are being installed on the space station.
As always, Dragon will be delivered to orbit today by SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, which provides 1.7 million pounds of thrust on its first stage, thanks to its 9 Merlin M1D engines. Once the first and second stages separate, these engines are also used to help land the first stage. The first stage will perform 3 burns today as it makes its way back down to Earth. First is the boost back burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite to help flip the first stage around to head back to the launch site. The second burn is the entry burn. That's where a single engine will reignite and shut down to help slow Falcon 9 down as it prepares to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And then finally, the landing burn. That'll be where 3 engines will slow down the rocket enough to perform a precision landing back down on landing zone 1.
Meanwhile, the second stage continues to orbit, powered by 1 single Merlin vacuum engine with over 220,000 pounds of thrust. The second stage will secure Dragon's entry into low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue. After separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing its guidance and navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
With T0 coming up in just about 20 minutes, our teams at the Cape and Hangar X are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready. Let's check in with Ronnie for a quick status update. How's it going, Ronnie?
Thanks, Jesse. We are still looking good for an on-time launch just over 20 minutes from now, and we'll keep monitoring all the vehicle systems. There we heard the call out for RP1 load complete on stage 2, so that means we are of course getting closer to liftoff. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy, and we're not tracking any major issues at this time. Right now, we're continuing to prep the vehicle for flight, and propellant loading began at T-minus 35 minutes. We also heard the call out a few minutes ago that the launch escape system is now armed. The range, which is monitoring keep-out zones and among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support launch tonight. Weather also looks good, and we are still tracking just a 5% chance of violation at our T0 time. But as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window, driven by the orbital mechanics constraints of 2 spacecraft meeting in orbit. Fun fact, the technical term for that meeting is called a rendezvous. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we will have to stand down tonight because of that instantaneous launch window, and instead target our backup opportunity, which is tomorrow at 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. But for now, with all systems go, let's turn it back over to Courtney for a status update from Houston.
Thanks, Ronnie. The flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston are station links between the station and Dragon and the ground are working properly, and right now everything is proceeding as planned. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the station will monitor the autonomous docking of Dragon tomorrow when they enter joint operations, which happens when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, which is an invisible boundary that helps us monitor spacecraft arriving and departing. After docking, the crews will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and happen about an hour and a half after docking. Once on board, the astronauts will be greeted by the space station crew and will then join in for opening remarks for the new crew members. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Chris Dobbins is on console overseeing the team for launch, and Flight Director Judd Freeling will be on console tomorrow for docking. That's it from here in Mission Control Houston. I'll toss it back to the team in Florida. Daryl, how's it looking?
Thank you very much, Courtney. And if you just joined us, T-minus 17 minutes and counting for the 7th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Commander Jasmine Mogbelli, pilot Andreas Mogensen, Andy Mogensen, and Mission Specialist Satoshi Furukawa and Konstantin Borisov are strapped into their seats inside the Dragon Endurance. They're at the top of the rocket. Falcon 9 rocket fueling. That operation is well underway. Launch escape system is armed. Of course, that means Dragon is prepared to launch itself.
Stand by for an update on the sensor. Teams are still discussing and looking for our path forward.
As you just heard there, SpaceX is looking at a sensor issue. And so trying to determine if the sensor is giving good data, good reading, or if...
Startup stage 2, lock loaded.
If they're looking at something else, of course, we'll keep close tabs on that. In the meantime, propellant load continues.
I think sometimes you have it's on sensors for other reasons. We want to make sure that we are getting an accurate reading of what's happening with the system they're looking at. Probably trying to decide if it's a real signal or if it's a hit from some other reason.
There's a lot of redundancy in the systems, as you mentioned, and those sensors have to make sure that the engineers understand exactly what they're looking at. So we'll, again, keep tabs. In the meantime, here's a little bit about crew-7. Lieutenant Colonel Jasmine Mogbelli, military helicopter test pilot. There she is. She hails from Long Island, New York. She's a mother to 2 twin girls, and she is the mission commander. This is pilot Andy Mogensen's second trip to space station. His first was as the flight engineer for the ESA IRIS mission in 2015. Mission specialist Satoshi Furukawa's interest in space began when he was 5 years old and he saw the Apollo 11 moon landing on TV. And mission specialist Konstantin Borisov was selected to be a cosmonaut in 2018, and this will be his first trip to space. More than 10,000 people all gathered, including these folks. Some special students. Those kids are, I should call kids, they're students, right? College students. They're part of the First Nations launch, and they're giving us a big wave from the Banana Creek viewing location. They're from the University of Washington, University of Colorado, and Queen's University. Visiting as part of NASA's First Nations launch, an Artemis Student Challenge, where they design, build, and launch their own high-powered rockets. Welcome and enjoy the launch. T-minus 14 minutes and counting. Awaiting crew-7 with 3 of them as they were zipping around the Earth.
Hey, Daryl, good morning.
Well, good morning to you, Frank, Stephen, and Woody. Okay, minutes away from liftoff. You're inside the spacecraft. What's it like?
The rocket is a living, breathing machine. We fuel the Falcon 9 rocket on the pad while the crew is on board. I expected that my heart would be racing, but actually it was just so much like training that I felt quite calm.
Well, I'm sure calm will give way to excitement, right? When crew-7 comes aboard. What do you think that'll be like?
More than anything, it's your friends coming up to station, right? So you get to hug and greet your friends that you haven't seen for several months, and it's always just a really fun reunion.
You know, they're coming on board, they're going to live on board. It's really exciting to greet them as new friends and crewmates.
Well, those new friends and crewmates, will you have any advice for them when they come aboard, like things to do, things not to do?
The awesome thing is that we have an amazing ground team that catches all of it and keeps us honest and keeps us out of trouble. And so you can just kind of relax and enjoy it and just allow yourself to take it in, because it really is a pretty special experience.
Really enjoy your time up here with the people, with the environment, and with the opportunity to work up here and look at the Earth. It's really amazing. Just really enjoy it.
All right, speaking of enjoyment, do you have a fun way to confirm that you're in space? Something you can do? You want to give that move a score, Jessica?
I don't know. It required assistance from 2 crew members, so I don't know. I'll give it an 8.5.
Okay, that was very kind. All right, well, before the crew-7 got into their spacecraft, we had a picture with the Falcon 9 booster that will take them up into space. There they are on the business end of those 9 Merlin engines. Once we leave planet Earth, these fine folks at Johnson Space Center will take over. This is mission control.
We are still continuing to assess that sensor and proceeding with the count.
Okay, so as you heard, they're still working the sensor, but at the same time continuing to load the propellants on board Falcon. So just as we count down these last few minutes, you've got the launch team. They're taking a look at a sensor and some of the readings there. At the same time, we're proceeding forward and they're communicating with the astronauts inside. So as we get down to these final minutes, any thoughts?
This is an exciting time for the crew. You know, they're probably running through some checklists of their own right now. They may be pretty busy in there, going through those same things that they've done in their simulations so many times before. But I bet it's getting pretty real right now. And hearing those calls about the sensor probably raises a few questions as well. But I know the ground will keep them informed as we go. 10 minutes. It's getting very close.
Indeed it is. And tracking everything are Leah and Ronnie at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Take us through the rest of the count.
Thanks, Daryl. Our next major countdown event will be at the T-minus 10-minute mark, so coming up here,
And
when the
Dragon
Falcon 9 launch
stand by for display configuration.
There we go ahead and have the Dragon astronauts are standing by for display configuration, which will let them know that we are even closer to liftoff. The launch commit criteria that we're waiting to hear that call out for are specific thresholds and pieces of information about the entire Falcon 9 system needed to make sure that the rocket is healthy. Of course, we do have many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight.
Today, which is also about the same amount of time it takes to get to orbit, a 9-minute ride. That's about the time we'll see second stage cutoff. A few minutes after that is when we'll see Crew Dragon separate from the second stage. And we'll be listening to some performance calls as we get into the final countdown, of course, and then after liftoff. On the ground, you'll hear SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones, but there are some other calls you'll hear the crew make also after liftoff. These are different abort zones. They come in the form of different number and letter combinations, and these are throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. So the first two are 1A and 1B. They have that name because they're in the first stage. That lasts until they're up to the very north of North Carolina, and the next are 2A through 2E. Those come into play when the second stage is powering Dragon. That takes us from the top of North Carolina all the way to the tip of Newfoundland in the northern Atlantic. Now, a little bit different from the other naming system, you'll hear the call Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland, meaning they would target off the ground. You'll hear those different calls throughout the flight uphill, along with key performance call-outs from the guidance, navigation, and control officer, as well as the propulsion lead.
One of the next call-outs that we're listening for is the announcement that Stage 1 engine chill has started. Right now, the propellant in the tanks is isolated from the engines, but at T-minus 7 minutes, we'll open up the engine pre-valves and start passing begins for the start sequence. We do this because this small amount of locks to basically prepare the engine hardware. There's the call out for engine chill. So now we're basically preparing that engine hardware to flow all of the locks and propellant into it during flight. Next up, we should hear the call out for stage 1 RP1 load completion.
And Dragon SpaceX, stand by for final go, but please confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
All right, we heard their crew displays. Those 3 screens from which they can monitor the mission are configured for launch.
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
And confirmation that RP1, the intensified kerosene or the rocket fuel that propels the crew into orbit, loading is complete on the first stage. We did hear the second stage was completed a short time ago as well. Now T-minus 6 minutes until launch. We are still loading liquid oxygen on the first and second stages. This is the oxidizer we need to combine with the densified kerosene that just finished loading. Coming up, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and transition to internal power at about 5 minutes until launch. Then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional rigidity and structural support as we get ready for the strong back to retract. It'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we'll see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. That strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for the prop load and the different gases being loaded on board. So we're continuing to check through a couple of more fueling milestones, including one around the 2-minute mark, where we will hear
Dragon is configured for terminal count, and Dragon's on internal power. Falcon tanks pressurizing for strong back recheck.
So there we heard the call out that we are preparing for strong back retract. And as Leah just mentioned, the strong back is that white truss structure that you see on the left side of Falcon 9. Got a better shot of it right there.
Strong back is retracting.
Just before lift. There we heard the call out from Mission Control that we are retracting the strong back now. The strong back is part of the transporter erector, which was used not only to roll Falcon 9 out to the launch pad, but also to raise it into its vertical position. It will retract just about 2 degrees first after those clamp arms open up around the base of Dragon's trunk, and then just before liftoff, we'll actually go all the way back to 45 degrees retracted to give Falcon 9 and crew-7 room for liftoff.
now under 4 minutes until launch. Next up, we're looking for the first stage liquid oxygen loading to finish at T-minus 3 minutes. You're starting to see some white clouds on your screen. That is vapor, it's normal. Obviously this liquid oxygen that we're loading is super chilled, so a little bit of that will boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 lock loading is complete.
Great view of crew-7 there inside of the Dragon spacecraft, awaiting liftoff just under 3 minutes from now.
Dragon is in terminal count.
Now about 2 minutes and 30 seconds until launch. Next milestone, we're looking up for stage 2 LOX load to complete. Additionally, shortly after that, we'll hear gas closeout begin, isolating the feed lines from the different gas systems for the Falcon 9 rocket. Those will get vented overboard through the umbilicals and the strong back itself. confirmation that Stage 2 LOX load is complete. Dragon and Falcon 9 fully fueled.
Gas closeout has started. Expect loud venting.
There's the gas closeout call that we expected. Additionally, we will be in auto idle. This puts the rocket in a state the flight computer's under. Coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we'll hear that Dragon is in countdown. Its computer will switch to countdown mode. We'll also hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon's terminal count.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown and configured for launch, and the flight termination system now armed. Less than a minute until liftoff today.
Dragon, SpaceX.
This flight termination
Go for
system.
launch.
You heard it, crew-7 getting the go for launch. Just at the time of liftoff today, the space station will be flying 260 miles over southeastern Iraq.
T-minus 15. K-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine full power. And liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, go crew-7.
Endurance ascends, an international
Copy,
crew
1 Alpha.
destined for the International Space Station.
Stage 1
That's
propulsion is
1.7
nominal.
million. Good calls from the propulsion officers here. Propulsion's nominal. 1.7 million pounds of thrust on Falcon 9, taking crew-7 to the International Space Station, now traveling almost 300 miles per hour.
Nominal power and telemetry.
We are just about T
Stage 1
plus
throttle down.
45 seconds into the 7th rotational crew mission on board Dragon and Falcon 9, and right now the vehicle is throttling down to help us pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure. There's the call out that crew-7 is now moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q. Stage 1 throttle up.
Confirmation we have moved through max Q and are throttling back up.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
Heard that call from Jasmine on crew-7, as well as confirmation from the ground. The call out for 1 Bravo means we are in the second and final abort mode for the first
MVAC
stage,
chill
but
is
continuing to
underway.
get good performance. We've got engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine. We will then be looking for MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and second stages separating. Then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite. We are now coming up on 2 minutes into the flight, the spacecraft traveling over 2,000 miles per hour.
Really incredible nighttime views of Falcon 9 and crew-7 on your screen right now. So as Leah just mentioned, we are keeping an eye on a couple of critical flight milestones coming up back to back here.
Stage 1 throttle
Those are
down.
going to be MECO, so main engine cutoff now that we're throttling down stage 1, followed by stage separation and second stage ignition.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed. Copy, 2 Alpha. MVAC ignition.
So there you heard and saw MECO, stage sep, and hopefully you heard Jasmine call out for the 2 Alpha abort mode just before second stage ignition.
And of course, this is the second stage, powering Dragon on its flight, now traveling almost 4,000 miles per hour. Over 3 minutes since launch, the second stage will continue to power the spacecraft. And our first look at the crew inside. We'll be standing by for SECO. That's the next major milestone for this second stage engine. That comes shortly before 9 minutes into the flight, so we've still got some time on this engine.
So right now, while crew-7 makes its way to orbit, our first stage booster is making its way back to land. So you may hear the call-outs here on the net shortly that we are in the middle of our boost back burn. Right now, stage 1 is coasting.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Good call-outs there that Dragon is on the right track. And confirmation from Commander Jasmine McBelly.
Continuing to see good performance on this lone Merlin vacuum engine on the stage. Also, as we've heard, nominal trajectory. That's the guidance, navigation, and control officer here at SpaceX stating that we are on the correct path. Dragon's pointed in the right direction. The second stage continues firing until, like we mentioned, second stage engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 50 seconds into the flight. Right now, we are 4 minutes and 30 seconds since our on-time liftoff, now traveling at 5,000 miles per hour. This single Merlin vacuum engine can provide over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space, doing its job to take our crew to the International Space Station today.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
More good news from Mission Control.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
So with that Bermuda call out, we actually know that the ground station transmitting this flight data back to us is coming from Bermuda.
The crew is currently pulling a little more than 1 G as the second stage engine continues to propel their flight. Continuing to hear good calls to the crew, now 5 minutes and 30 seconds into the flight, traveling at 6,400 miles per hour. Again, we will continue to see this second stage fire for about 3 more minutes. Shortly after second stage engine cutoff, we will see it separate from Dragon, which will continue.
Now, at this point in the flight, we are just about 15 seconds away from stage 1 entry burn start. At this point, the center engine on Falcon 9 will be lit for just about 10 seconds to help us slow the vehicle down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. That's not the only thing helping us on re-entry, though. The first stage sees high drag on re-entry, which scrubs roughly 70% of the velocity by the time the landing burn begins, which you just had great views of on the left-hand side of your screen. Florida Space Coast beginning to come into view in the background. All while crew-7, of course, on the right-hand side of your screen, lit up by that MVAC engine, continues on its way to orbit.
And we are now coming up on almost 7 minutes into the flight. Crew traveling at 9,400 miles per hour. Again, we still have about 1 minute, 45 seconds left with the second stage propelling the crew.
And of course, we are also expecting that landing burn start from Falcon 9 any second now. Great views.
Stage 2 FTSO saved.
Great news there that stage 1 has successfully landed back at landing zone 1 in Florida.
And stage 2 continues to propel Dragon and our crew-7 crew members. We now are coming up on SECO, second stage engine cutoff. Again, looking at that about 8 minutes and 50 seconds into the flight. Everything continues as planned today, now traveling over 13,000 miles per hour. Again, we're looking for eventually a good orbital insertion at which we'll be traveling. Good calls here at Mission Control in Hawthorne. And we are standing by for second stage engine cutoff.
Copy, Shannon.
Heard that call for Shannon. That is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, the final abort zone.
MVAC shutdown.
There's audio confirmation, and you can see on your screen that we have had successful second engine cutoff 1 of our MVAC engine.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Dragon.
And good news there that crew-7.
Nominal orbital insertion.
Dragon SpaceX.
Awesome to hear.
Disarmed.
That's the first look at the crew, now in microgravity, confirmation of a good Earth orbit insertion. We are now coming up on 10 minutes into the flight. Of course, we saw second stage engine cutoff, and you're actually getting a look at their zero-G indicator there. We'll stand by for them to tell us a little bit more about that shortly, but we are also standing by for second stage separation from Dragon.
Acquisition of signal in Finland.
So as Leah mentioned, right now, Dragon and Stage 2 are still attached. Great views of that zero-G indicator there. And what we're doing right now is basically letting any residual dynamics of the vehicle settle out prior to separation. We are expecting that separation event in probably about 90 seconds. Crew looks like they're having a great time up in space, too.
And as we stand by for that separation, shortly thereafter, we'll be looking for the nose cone to begin deploying. That command will be sent, and we'll see it open shortly after. We'll need the nose cone to open to expose those forward bulkhead thrusters, as well as the docking mechanism with which they will use to link up with the International Space Station. After their ride, it's almost 30 hours long. Again, we had liftoff right on time today at 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time. The crew making a smooth journey into orbit. It's now been 11 minutes, 20 seconds since that liftoff. We had confirmation of good orbital insertion, and we are standing by for second stage separation from Dragon.
Great views of mission control here in Hawthorne, California. And the SpaceX team standing in the background, standing by for Dragon separation. Of course, you also have continued telemetry readouts from Dragon and Stage 2 in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Dragon separation
Crew-7, on behalf of the Falcon team, I'd like to welcome you to orbit, and we hope you enjoyed the ride on Falcon 9. Space travel is difficult, even though you make it look easy, so thank you for trusting us to get you up there. It's not a bad way to spend a day in the office. Stand by for words from the launch director.
Hello, Crew-7. This is Launch Director here on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX Launch and Recovery team, I'm honored to welcome Dragon's first ever all-international crew to orbit. Счастливого пути, Gotor, Iterashai. Godspeed, Crew-7. Cheers.
SpaceX, thanks for the ride. It was awesome. On behalf of Andy, Satoshi, Toshi, and I, we'd like to thank the multitude of people who've led us to this unique moment. We may have 4 crew members on board from 4 different nations, Denmark, Japan, Russia, and the USA, but we're a united team with a common mission. We hope the work we do serves to benefit our beautiful home planet and those on it. As you said, human spaceflight requires an unparalleled level of vigilance and rigor, and we thank all those who prepared, not only us, but also this truly impressive spacecraft for flight. Finally, to our families, carry the greater burden of our coast to explore. Thank you. Go crew-7. Awesome ride.
Really incredibly moving words from Commander Jasmine Mogbelli now that she and her international team are up in space. That is going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage, like Leah mentioned, just about 30 hours from now. But for now, I'm going to hand it back over to Daryl and Jessica at Kennedy Space Center to wrap up our launch coverage tonight.
All right, thank you very much, and great job. And Jessica, what a launch.
It was spectacular. Like we said, those night launches are something to see. You see all those bright lights. You see those little nitrogen pulses when that first stage is coming back down. Spectacular.
Phenomenal roar, the thunder. You could feel it in your chest. And then, of course, the booster came back and landed, and that was some extra pop.
Pretty impressive all around. Sights, sounds, and even those feelings.
That's new, of course, to Crew, to NASA Crew, is bringing the booster back. NASA decided they have a lot of prop margin, propellant that is, and so they burn the first stage a little less and the second stage a little more. It allows them to bring the first stage back and back to land, which is good to see. And so you saw the zero-G indicator floating around. Tell us what it was.
I did. Well, that, Daryl, was a three-toed sloth. Important distinction, not Andy's kids' favorite animals. And as a family, they were even fortunate enough to see one in the wild in Costa Rica last Christmas when they were on vacation. So it was all kind of fate leading up to this, I think.
How about that? This is Andy Mogensen.
Andy Mogensen, the pilot. That's correct. That's right. And I guess his family calls him the slowest person in the world. So another reason why this three-toed sloth had such meaning for all of them.
Well, that actual sloth in the capsule looked like it was moving slow as well, but he's got an excuse.
You know, we have a saying in space, and it's often true. Yeah. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And when you rush too much, especially in space, doing a spacewalk or anything that you're doing, you get in trouble. So slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Wise words from our veteran space flyer, Jessica Muir, sorry. It's early. Hey, we got some social questions. Let's take a few. You don't mind?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's look on our screen here, and here we've got one that says, come Sunday morning. Beautiful shot right there, though, of the spacecraft looking out the back. Boy, that is high-resolution image. Come Sunday morning, Earth Eastern Time, what are the first few tasks the crew will do, and how will they best acclimate and get dialed into their mission?
Well, when we wake up in the morning on board the space station, we open up our computer and we have a plan that lays out our entire schedule for the day, whether it's scientific experiments, hardware, maintenance, whatever it is that you need to get done. I know what this crew will be doing. One of the first things they do, of course, is a safety briefing. So we want to make sure that they have all of the information they need in case they had any kind of situation on the space station where maybe they needed an emergency breathing mask or a fire extinguisher, anything like that. Safety first, veteran crew that is up there will take them through that, show them where everything is, talk through some of the main messages, and then they'll have a longer session, usually the next day or later that week. They'll get into their crew quarters. Usually your crewmates will do a favor for you and unpack some of your things so you don't have to do all that when you get there. You arrive to your crew quarters and already have some of the things that you need out, maybe even some pictures from home. When I arrived, my crewmates had really taken great care of me. They had decorated my crew quarters. I had pictures of my friends and family. Everything was all laid out, and that really made it a nice, smooth transition, because those first few moments in space, especially when you've never been there before as a rookie, you're not quite that graceful yet. You know, you don't have your space wings quite yet, and you're getting used to just moving around and being in that three-dimensional microgravity environment.
And so you're talking about, you know, getting used to the environment up there, and having a little something from home is important too. You took up a flight kit. These astronauts all have a flight kit. You, in fact, brought a few things that you took up into space. What were a couple of the more meaningful ones that you took?
I did. You know, we often pictures of family and friends, like we've talked about before, or things that represent places we've been and worked. I brought up a picture of my wedding photo of my parents. Unfortunately, my father had passed away before I went to space, so I wanted to have a piece of him up there with me. I brought up some things to represent other things along the way, my home state of Maine. I had a university flag with me from my undergraduate university.
Yeah.
Sometimes we bring up presents for each other because we're up there for birthdays or holidays. Drew Morgan, my crewmate, brought us these harmonicas.
Nice harmonica. And briefly, let's look at the screen here. We can see that the nose cone is deploying. Beautiful shot there. Of course, the nose cone has to deploy in order for Dragon to connect up to the International Space Station. And once this clears out of the way, it is quite a view. Depending on where Earth is in relation. Looks like we're pointed mostly in space, which makes sense. Sometimes you get an Earth view.
There's a lot of space in space.
There is. There certainly is indeed. And then what else? Oh, you got something special.
My one item that I brought that was my personal kind of selfish item that wasn't for anybody else was my panda. This is Pandemonium. I've had him since I was 5 years old.
Pandemonium.
So he made his way to space with me as well, and we saw a lot of stuffed animals floating with these zero-G indicators. We saw that three-toed sloth, but Pandemonium was up there floating in all of his glory as well. And, you know, these are all just things that remind us of home and really help us share the mission with everybody back home. All of these places and things that have meant something to us along the way, because we did not get there alone. We got there with the support of so many people that helped us. And this mission is for everyone. It's really for all of humankind. So hopefully they can all share in.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your flight kit with us. This is especially, I mean, this is a 40-year-old tour. Right
41 here. Now, yeah. He's been around the block.
He just said he wants to go back to space.
He does want to go, but we all want to go back to space. So hopefully he'll have another opportunity.
We just got confirmation that nose cone is fully deployed. And so Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station. Now, a member of crew-7 will kick off a major study that will give us a comprehensive look at how the human body is affected by time and space. Let's bring in now NASA's Jasmine Hopkins for more.
As we saw this morning, the Commercial Crew Program launches astronauts from American soil, and this enables NASA's human research on the International Space Station. Joining us now to talk more about that is Kurt Costello, ISS Chief Program Scientist. Thank you for joining us, Kurt.
Thanks, Jasmine. It's great to be here this morning.
We are glad to have you here. So how does the Commercial Crew Program better enable NASA's human research?
So the Commercial Crew Program has enabled us to launch again from U.S. soil. And what that means is a lot of our sensitive science that needs to be loaded within the last few hours before we launch can now be quickly transported from our labs here at KSC to the vehicle on the launch pad. So this enables us a late load capability that allows us to get our samples, critical samples, onto the vehicles. And the Commercial Crew Program has also enabled us to launch more frequently and regularly. So a lot of our sensitive investigations that need specific timing for when we get those samples to the space station and then back down are enabled by that program.
That is great, Kurt. And can you tell us a little bit more about the new human research investigation going to be part of crew-7?
Sure. I think you're referring to CIPHER, and CIPHER is not just one investigation, but 14 in one. And what it's really setting out to do is to help us
Hey, I'm always the last to leave the house whenever we're going anywhere. Personally, I think it's with good reason. But they say I'm the slowest person alive, which is also why it's a three-toed sloth, not a two-toed sloth, because apparently that would be too fast for me. So welcome to space, Sasha the sloth.
Dragon, we appreciate the introduction to your zero-G indicator and noting that that is probably officially now the fastest sloth ever.
This is Satoshi. It's nice to be in space, and I'm very glad to see happy faces. 日本の皆さん、国際宇宙ステーションへ、再びして着実に仕事をしてきます。Всем большое спасибо, огромное восхищение тем, как мы прокатились на ракете, мы в космосе. Невероятно. Полет в космос — это результат действий скоординированных тысяч людей, которые работают в разных странах. Всем большое спасибо. Роскосмос, НАСА, JAXA, SpaceX. Моим друзьям и семье большое спасибо. Thank you very much for all your help in manned space flight. That's a proud example of how much we can achieve working together in harmony. Let's continue. Cool. Thanks a lot to everyone, to my family as well. Thanks.
SpaceX copies all. Thank you for the kind words. And Jaws, if you are ready to copy, I do have some upcoming words on the phase burn.
Expect a lesson signal. Good, Hilly.
Dragon is ready to copy.
Okay, wanted to give you an update that we are going to be losing TDRS for voice comms for about 15, that's approximately 15 minutes, which is going to include that upcoming phase burn per your displays. We do have a ground station pass during that burn prep, so you will actually be able to call us in the blind. However, you will be LOS during the burn. There's no concerns, but we'll pick you back up at 0819 Zulu, which will be right after the burn, and we'll confirm that burn performance. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon copies all. We'll lose you on TDRS for the phase burn, but we can make calls via the ground station in the blind, and we'll catch you on the backside at 0819.
Good readback.
Okay, you just heard some communication between Commander Jasmine Mogbelli and SpaceX's launch team. Just saying they're going to lose TDRS connectivity, which will, during the burn, they'll be unable to communicate, but they've got a ground station that will catch them on either side of that. So communication will be established before and after the burn. Earlier, we heard some words from Andy Mogensen. Of course, you told us that that was a sloth. Wasn't sure that we were going to be able to, get some words from him, but it was good to hear from him and the other crew members about, now that they're in space.
Absolutely, and we got a name, Sasha the Sloth.
Sasha the Sloth. The fastest moving sloth ever to be a sloth.
Yeah, among the legendary, famous stuffed animals in space.
That's
now.
right.
That's a thing.
Joins the long list of them. And so Jasmine, Andreas, Satoshi, and Konstantin are on course to arrive at the International Space Station around 8:39 Eastern Time tomorrow. NASA TV, well, we will be wrapping up our coverage, but you can follow along with crew-7's entire ride to the station and hear real-time audio from that space to ground, which we were listening to just then, on our mission audio stream on YouTube. Make sure you look for the link on our NASA social media accounts and in the description of the NASA YouTube launch broadcast. And though our coverage here at Kennedy Space Center is concluding, crew-7's mission has only just begun. They'll get to the International Space Station in about 30 hours. It's going to be a long ride. But then they'll be able to meet and join, I should say, crew-7 to crew-6. And that'll be quite a ceremony.
Absolutely. These first missions, these first moments in space are absolutely unforgettable. I'll never forget that. Feeling weightlessness for the first time. You're still strapped in your seat, but everything starts lifting up, your arms, your pencils, anything that was on the floor, the zero-G indicator, everything. And I remember looking across at my crewmate, just sharing those moments and those smiles. I know how happy that crew is right now. I am so excited for them and their mission. It will take a little while, 30 hours, like you said, to get to space station, but they are in space right now, and I know they're enjoying every minute. Congratulations, Crew-7. We are so excited for you. This is going to be an incredible mission on the International Space Station.
Great words, Jessica. Appreciate those. And Crew-6 will be coming back down in about a week. They'll have a roughly 5-day handover, and then they'll return. Next up for us is our post-launch news conference scheduled at 5 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA TV. And of course, we'll have live joint coverage of docking and the crew-7 welcome ceremony starting tomorrow at 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA TV, as well as SpaceX's YouTube channel. You can find mission updates on X, at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov, including, again, the link to that mission audio stream if you want to stick around with crew-7 and be with them on their entire journey. Well, before we sign off from Kennedy, I want to thank Jessica Meir for being here on the launch broadcast and sharing your incredible experiences and all your insight, answering the questions, bringing pandemonium and showing them off. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having an astronaut, and especially you today on crew-7 to share this with us.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure. Any good day when a rocket ignites is a great day for astronauts all around the planet. So we wouldn't miss out on it for the world. Very happy to be here and excited to share this moment with all of you. Thanks so much.
And a huge thanks as well to all of our guests for joining us today, but most importantly, thank all of you for watching. For everyone here at NASA and SpaceX, have a great morning and keep looking up. We leave you now with a look back at highlights from Suit Up